edition of Wednesday webinar from MRSI Season 8. Next slide, please, Sandeep. For those of you who don't know us and joining us for the first time, a little bit about the MRSI. MRSI is a unique not-for-profit association of both providers and buyers of research and insights. Established a while ago in 1988, with an objective of creating awareness of the industry among public at large, as well as the government. Not only do we do that as MRSI, MRSI anchors and promotes professional standards to make sure that the quality of work this industry delivers is top-notch. And it also provides a platform for professionals to engage, showcase their work, and collaborate on common industry issues. Our Wednesday webinar is one such platform which brings professionals together to share with them what's happening in the industry in terms of new methods, new information, and cutting-edge work that's happening around the world. The board of directors span various sectors and industry and represent the MRSI and focus on different aspects of what I just spoke about. Thank you, Sandesh. Next slide. Before we move on to today's topic, a quick introduction to the webinar committee. Abhinav Goel, Lead Consumer Shopper and Marketplace Insights from Nestle. Uttara Dhawan, Associate Vice President at the Third Eye. Adya Sinha, Research Manager at the Third Eye. I, Sundar Muthuraman, I'm an independent consultant focused on marketing measurement. Amitabh, experienced insights leader in the market, in CPG, in pharma, and presently an independent consultant. Sivakumar Somanathan is a consumer behavior consultant and drives an interesting organization called Curious Cat Consulting from Chennai. Not only do we represent a cross-section of the industry, this is perhaps the first time where we have a distribution of the committee which is across all key cities in India, or at least some of the larger cities. And there's a good gender representation. So finally, we are getting there. So thanks to the committee, you will see some exciting work and topics that we will share as we go along for the next few months. Next slide, please. I know you're not here today to listen to everything that I said so far. Without much ado, I move on to the topic for today, which is winning with senses, how sensory sciences drives market success. That's the topic for us. We have three very experienced panelists on this method of measurement and insights. Nirmala Metwal, Supriya Dan, and Sandeep Budhiraja. I'll shortly introduce to them, but a little bit on the topic. When I was listening to our panelists about sensory science and what it can do, what really hooked me as a South Indian was, they were mentioning that there's actually, they can tell me how bitter is bitter, what bitterness is actually tasting good. I was caught, I was hooked rather, and I've been listening in on this topic. I'm super excited about what all of you will pick up from our discussion today. Let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. Sandesh, next slide, please. Like I mentioned, we have Nirmala Metwal. She's the Consumer Sensory Insights Leader for Mondelez International. We have Supriya Dan, an independent consultant on human insights, behavioral science, brand and product strategy, and she's also ex-Unilever. Sandeep Budhiraja is Director and Promoter of Spark Sensory. As you can see, people who have made senses come to life from brands across key consumer categories that we all use every day. Without much more ado, let me invite Sandeep I'm mixing up. I'm looking at my notes, sorry. Yeah, I'm inviting Supriya to speak about what all this sensory science is about. What exactly is it? And then we hear every one of our panelists' perspectives over the next few slides. Over to you, Supriya.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Sundar. Let me start with what is science, and I think people have their own perspectives about it. From my perspective, humans are primarily feeling beings before they are thinking beings, right? So our senses is how we experience the world around us. So for me, sensory science is about connecting the tangible things we experience with the way that they are processed in the human brain, right? And therefore, it's interpretation for people. And that's something that is absolutely invaluable for product design and for brands. So that's my take on sensory science.
Nirmala?
Sandeep?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, all right.
So I think
We're
sensory
stepping over
science
each other.
is a vital, science which really plays important role in various functions, whether it's R&D, quality, or even in marketing. For me, sensory science helps us decode, translate the abstract consumer needs into specific product attributes that enables our product or pack developer to deliver, to create desired consumer experience which is consistent across the globe. Yeah, over to you, Sandeep.
Thanks, Nirmala. Thanks, Supriya. Thanks, Sundar. I would try and make it more laymanish, as I'm a layman still. First time a client said your consumer data is subjective, like and I'm a quant researcher, I was so angry saying, why is she calling and saying it's subjective? Because at the end, she wanted to understand the biscuit we tested, and we tested it some 2,400 people, was coming across as too sweet. And she said, what is this too sweet? How sweet is this? And we didn't have any answer. We went to the open-endeds, but open-endeds don't give you that. So what sensory science does, it is a systematic way to describe. It's an objective data, and we'll cover it more next in the next slide, but which people can perceive. So it literally gives you the why people are saying that. Why people are saying, what can I do with this sweetness? So that R&D and the teams or the product development teams can work with it, whether it's appearance, aroma, taste, and make sure they act with precision. It's not a, let's try, let's fail, let's try, let's fail. You know what change you're going to make, and you know the impact that it would have. That's what Sensi helps you do. Any other comments? Anything that you both of you want to add to this?
Sandeep, so since you said layman, I'm going to ask you a silly question before you obviously give us the science and method behind it. For
Sure.
example, would sensory science help decipher why some people prefer holidays in the mountains versus the ocean side?
Yes, it is actually will get married to the behavioral science than just sensory. But you will have to understand the sensorials of the place also. So we're getting a lot wider. Till now, the sensory science, until 20 years back, the sensory science was limited to only food and drinks. It has just expanded into broad FMCG, with Unilever leading the way, because they said there's a new technique and there's an existing interesting technique, let's put it that way. Why the hell are we not using it? So they were the first ones to actually experiment with it, they and L'Oreal, in terms of using it for skincare. But it's largely limited to food, drink, and FMCG. We have tried using it outside, but that's rare.
Got it. I'll just make a quick.
Yeah,
go on.
Between the mountain and the sea, I think when you ask people, they're typically not able to tell you the why, right? They just say, I like it because it feels good, right? I like the trees, I like the water. You get very generic responses. What sensory science will do is it will take the experience of the mountains, it will take the experience of the sea, and dissect it into small bits and pieces of what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, all of that into the senses. That is the whole experience. The slicing of the senses is not something that naive consumers can do, right? It is what the sensory science achieves, and therefore it is possible to work on that experience in a far more tangible manner. So
But
I say that.
all right, thank you, Sandeep and Supriya. I'll just make an administrative announcement before I hand back to you, Sandeep. We have our audience dialed in. Unfortunately, they can't interact with us live on voice. But what they can definitely do is post their questions in the questions window. So audience, please type in your questions. Our panel this time is brave and courageous. They've said, let the questions come on whenever they do and not towards the end. So quite happy to bring your questions to the panel as we go along. Thank you so much. Back to you, Sandeep.
Yeah, but if you're gonna again throw a googly like Muralidharan, then it's very difficult. But yes,
No,
going on
no
to the
more
next slide.
googlies. Over to you. Yeah.
Next slide, please. So the whole let me take a step back. What is sensory science? You know, how is it different from consumer research? Consumer research, a lot of consumer research which is about products starts with the first question, which is about overall liking. How much do you like? People can use 5-point scales depending on which company you're in, or servicing, or 9-point scale, or 10-point scale, or 11-point scale, but it is about liking. Moment you get into liking, you're getting into what Supriya was saying, subjective answers, which people, I don't know why I like it. We ask an open-ended question, say, what did you like about it? And now we have chatbots which try and identify what you liked it and what you disliked it. But still, it's very difficult for a normal consumer to know why did they actually like it. What was so differentiating about this? What was so different about it that if they loved it, why did they love it? Normally, when you actually are very differentiated and you love it, you are able to get something. But when it is a normal product and you increase the amount of chocolate in it, consumers are not gonna, just if it is a 10% increase, consumers might not get it. Which leads me to a question which a client of mine had asked me, and again, I'm repeating myself. My biscuits are sweet. You have tested it twice. What should I do with it? What Sensory does is that it uses trained assessors. What does trained assessors mean? We recruit people who have sensory acuity. We test them for sensory acuity. There are one of the most well-known tests is a bitter blind test. So we know sensory assessor or sensory panelists across the world would be a bitter blind. We don't take bitter blind people. So there are other tests which we test them for, and it's an education, because when you go and see that sensory acuity isn't something that comes naturally. It's not something that you work on. It comes to you or it doesn't come to you. And an incidental fact: women are more likely to be sensory acute than men, and that's a fact. It's not. I'm not making it up to humor my co-panelists or the audience which is there, but that's a fact that women are more likely to be panelists. Women are. So we recruit these people, we train them on different, we expose them to a category, then we train them on different attributes, we explain different attributes, and some of the work that we actually do becomes very, very complex. I'm not going to get into very complex things today, but you explain each attribute, explain what is aftertaste. You also give them something which I'll bring Nirmala. You also give them markers. Or what is a 0 and what is a 15? If you're talking of aftertaste, what is the thing? So they understand how to score. You work with them. Now there are various schools of thought of working with them, but what people end up doing is at least a 3 to 6 week training on one category. So there are companies like ours. There is MMR Research in India. There are lots of companies which also run panels where you can send different categories, but we would then train our panel, because it's an already trained panel, for a week before on that category to get them with all the at least a 1 week to train them. And that's what we do about. What we give is, if your product was too sweet, we'll choose a benchmark. Against that benchmark, all attributes would be measured. What that does is that it gives you an exact distance between the benchmark and your product, and you can see what is the difference on sweetness, what's the difference on aftertaste, all attributes. You can literally plot a spider plot and say, here we are, and here is the market leader. Where am I? And market leader doesn't always have to benchmark, but that's, so you will get very specific information about the flavor, texture of the and aroma of the product vis-a-vis the benchmark and the market and whatever else is the sample profile. You've got 8 samples, 10 samples, and we'll complicate it further when we come with data. But that's what you'll get is distance, an exact distance, something which consumer research doesn't give you. You can have product. What all does it does? It's an objective description of product and pack, different sensory attributes, different sensory characteristics. You also get a sensory map to show where are you, where is your product, and which sensory characteristic is it very much linked to? Where do people see it? And then you also do what is the very often quoted, very less understood drivers of liking. But drivers of liking very simply can give you which sensory attribute to tweak to get your overall liking score higher. In a very simplistic manner, it is obviously not as simplistic as I'm making it sound, but it gives you a data which is actionable and which gives you things which you can tweak around. Supriya, something to add?
No, I think you covered it beautifully.
Nirmala? Mute.
No, you can go ahead.
The only thing is that where we've been talking sensory, we've been talking differentiation. I talked R&D, while the last thing is that sensory is also very useful when you're making changes in your products. So it's not a question of just doing experimentation, launching new products. When you change an ingredient, when you change the cocoa which is coming from Ghana to cocoa which is coming from Kenya, you still need to test. It's not that you can just put that cocoa in and say, I can do my chocolate with new cocoa. You need to check. So sensory comes in very handy to make sure that your product profile remains the same. Okay, I think I bored people enough, so we can go to the next slide.
Hey, let me just step in with a question from our audience.
Sure.
I know you will speak about the success story on this slide. Supriya, perhaps keep this in mind when you start off with your example. This is a question from Mandeep and Subhranshu from Airtel. How would one use sensory signs when only 2 senses are engaged, touch and sight? But I may add it's not 2, perhaps there is a third, which is sound. We are referring to the smartphone screen, which dominates, human time spent today. So over to you, Supriya. As you speak off with success stories of this great science, keep this in mind, and of course, all of the panelists just chip in and answer the question, please. Thank you.
Yeah, great. So I think it's a great question. I think and possibly the examples can kind of bring it to life, because it is not necessary that absolutely all senses are engaged at the same time, or you are providing that little nudge for all senses in the solutions that you offer. It is, you could just take one area and just, give a little nudge to consumers in that space. And I think the examples I'm going to talk about possibly bring that to life in some way. So there are 3 examples that I will really quickly talk to you about, where 3 different senses, there is hearing, there is touch, there is olfactory, which is smell, have helped drive significant value for their respective businesses. So the first example is from a time where people were it's home care, it's detergents, where people were buying washing machines, but they kept using a hand wash powder in the machine, right? So all the large brands in the market were trying like really hard to drive upgradation and get people to use these machine relevant or matic powders as they are referred to. So initially what happened is that the brands kept sharing data with consumers that was like evidence. It's data that shows that matic powders are better, they work well in the machine, they are well formulated, all of that, all this kind of information. But the reality is that data does not change behavior, right? And I repeat, data does not change human behavior. So this particular example is that of Surf Excel packaging, right? Where the pack not only resembled a top loader machine, the lid of that pack is where the magic prevailed. Yeah? So the lid shut with a gentle yet convincing kind of a click, right? When you shut it or you opened it, there was that little click, and it was matched with the click that people felt when they were opening and shutting the lid of the washing machine. Okay, it is a very, very simple thing to do, very, very intuitive, and it's an intuitive intervention that actually pushed people and contributed to start the upgradation process for the brand. Yeah, so this is something about sound. The second example is that of a liquid hand wash, right? So the business challenge here was that people were barely rubbing the soap on their hands and were always in a rush to wash off, reducing. You just take the soap and then you're immediately putting your hand in the water and just I'm done. So they were reducing the interaction with the soap outside of the fact that the hands were not clean, right? If there is so little interaction. So it didn't allow the whole experience of the product. Like it did not allow the fragrance to express itself while washing, or even linger around on your hands after the wash. So the introduction of these beads in the soap is a fabulous, it's a tactile sensory intervention, because people intuitively don't want the beads to just roll off their hands, in the water. Yeah, they want to rub till they are dissolved, right? And that actually ended up enhancing the experience of the hand wash. Yeah, so that's the second example, which is more tactile, what you feel on the skin. And the last one is something that you all must have experienced. I mean, it is the we know that aroma of food can give rise. It sort of induces hunger cravings, right? So Cookie Man is one such example of a store that actually draws people towards it with the smell of freshly baked cookies. In fact, it defines the aroma of what is deemed to be freshly baked cookies. And you get the aroma even in stores that only stock up, tin boxes, right? So these three examples have either led to upgradation or enhancement of the product experience, or have attracted buyers, and each one very relevant for success in market. So whatever product category you are looking for, you don't want you don't want to crowd everything, hearing, touch, smell, everything. It's not necessary. You can take one thing that is core to the product, the use of the product, and try and see what is it that provides that that beautiful nudge for consumers, and tells their brain, hey, this works for me, hey, this is nice, this is the right thing for me. So yeah, so those are my three examples, and I hope I've kind of answered the question along the way.
Thanks, Supriya. You can go to some more examples, I guess.
Sure.
Over to
next slide, please.
You guys, the experts. Yeah.
Sandeep, would you play the video, please?
Let's see how KitKat uses sensorial elements. Distinctive snap when breaking the KitKat bar. Bright red packaging appeals across countries.
So simple case, but before that, would take on what Supriya was saying. Starbucks actually had always the coffee aroma, roasted coffee beans as a part of thing. They took it away, and they actually saw the sales declining. Something which they said consumers don't really not fancying it, and how are the sales declined when they took it away. Then they had to get it back in US into the stores, because it's again very difficult for a consumer to say, I come here because I get the aroma of roasted coffee bean, but that becomes an integral part of the brand offering. So for KitKat, the simple thing as the snap, the sound, which a lot of us don't even notice, is something which is so differentiating. And then the red color, which goes across, whether it's China, whether it's India, whether it's US, UK, gets noticed on the aisles, gets noticed in the stores, gets noticed in our airports, works for the brand so well. And we've done some semiotic work on also on it, but it's just such a lovely brand, which is its sensorials are so very clear. And then we come to the something which is Indian, and we can go on with examples. Pulse is the one which has used sensorial differentiation to disrupt the market. Candy category was stayed, nothing was happening, and here somebody comes who gives a candy with a masala bomb, candy which has a spicy tangy core, Indian core. It was not raw mango with spice, something which again, a lot of us have eaten it when we were younger. I don't know about the Gen Zs, if any Gen Zs are. I don't expect them to have eaten it, but a lot of us have eaten it, and they revive those memory. And it's a candy which is just growing and shows no stopping to it. So if you look, we have said to me, sensory is a science, but sensory is also an art. And why is an art and a science? Because it helps you differentiate. It is not necessary that every input will come from a QDA panel, the sensory panel, but if you work harder to differentiate, your brand and your products have a higher chances of making it work. Over to Nirmala, who will take you through some refreshment.
Thank you, Sandeep. Definitely, Supriya and Sandeep shared a great example. So let me also share you one of example around. You're sharing. Somebody is moving the screen.
Sandeep,
can you go to the next slide, please?
So I will share an example around a refreshing orange drink. And the goal which was given to us was to create a refreshing orange drink for a key market where we were struggling against our competition. And as a company, we thought of doing a bundle innovation. So as we all know that refreshment or refreshing is a very abstract kind of a thing, right? So because refreshment or refreshing, if you break it down, is the emotional, the functional, the multisensorial benefit which we should be providing to our consumer, or this is the expectation of a consumer when they talk about the refreshing. So when we further go or we deep dive, it's very difficult for a product developer to create a product which is refreshing, right? Because they don't know what it means. Right? So who is working on this now? We take the help of our panel, where they really help us to break it down what the refreshing drink is. But before going to there, when we talk about the refreshing, what functional benefit it is providing, the layman language is the hydration, the thirst quenching. The emotional is all about the feeling of lightness, the satisfaction. When I talk about the multisensorial, it's just not about the product, it's about the packaging cues till to the end of the satisfaction which they get after drinking the product. So we have to translate all these into a product specific attribute so that a product developer can create. So the task came to us that how to translate it, right? So as we know, and I have worked in this sensory science field since so long, so we know that we leverage our panel, we leverage our sensory panel who are trained, right? So how do we do? So what we started doing for this project was to expose the panel with a different product in that particular specific market. And To that, we were able to profile the products, and that while profiling the product, we got to know, okay, what are the sensory cues which are telling the consumer that this is refreshing. With the help of those sensory profile, those sensory attribute, we help the product developer to say that can you work on these attributes. So what are those attributes? These are like the appearance, aroma, the flavor, the mouthfeel, the aftertaste. So let's assume I talk about the appearance. So when I talk about the refreshing orange drink, what refreshes it by seeing the color? So it's like a light yellowish orange. When I talk about orange, so if you give a very pulpy kind of orange, you will not feel it as a refreshing. Instead of that, if you give a zesty orange kind of a aroma, then you feel it's refreshing. Then we move down to the flavor. So flavor again is a balance of your sweet or sour. But here, when I'm talking about refreshing, it needs to be more of a sourish kind of a thing, not too sweet. Because if it is too sweet, it's satiating for the consumer, and it just doesn't give you that refreshing element. Right. Further moving on the mouthfeel. So when I talk about the mouthfeel need not to be very thick or pulpier. If it's thick and pulpy, like it's a filling kind of a thing where the consumer is looking for a refreshing. So it need to be thinner. So by the help of panel, we break it down into these attributes, and when we put all these attribute into the refreshing language, we call it a design language for a refreshment. The product developer were able to create a product which was fitting into these design rules, and we were able to deliver this product to the consumer. And these sensory insights really enabled our product developer in creating a product which is like functionally, emotionally, and a multisensorial way of delivering the refreshment. And the consumer got delighted from the first sip to the last sip. And finally, when we launched this product, it was a complete bundle because we also worked on the packaging. The packaging also, the color need not to be very dark. It need to be a little bit lighter, and which was also cueing the refreshment through the pack, right? So when I talk about refreshing bundle, it goes from the pack till to the product, and even how you're communicating, your advertisement, your marketing, how you're playing around the marketing. So sensory play a critical role from end to end when we talk about the product successes. And here, this is a great example which really helped us to gain the market share, to beat our competition. And finally, we have a great winning product in the market. Sensory, if you leverage it in a right way, with the right tool, in a right environment, and deliver a vast success to the business. Thank you. Go to you, Sandeep.
Sandeep, before you step in, just a few observations from our audience and a query. Uruj Fatima, hope I got the name right, had raised a question about sensory methodologies to be applied in the fragrance industry to enhance fragrance evaluation and innovation. I guess it was partly answered by the example Supriya gave us about Cookie Man and the sensory context of fragrance and how it brought people into the store. There's another observation on the example Supriya again about was there any consumer insight which led the brand to design a pack with a click sound, right? Asking this because it seems difficult for consumers to articulate the association of the pack sound and the machine door sound. So you're saying, are we imagining it as marketers, or was there something behind it? And a last related question, this is from Priya Lobo. Priya, hi, good to see you on the show. The question is about requesting some thoughts or examples in the non-consumer goods category. Sandeep, you were categorical at the beginning, saying that it's a lot of work has happened in food, home care products, or personal care products. But any of you having any experience, I'm sure Priya would appreciate your points of view. So over to you, Supriya. Start off, and then hand over to the other panelists as you see fit.
I really love the question, to be very, very honest. Yeah, these insights are really, really difficult to come by, which is why I go back to what he said. Sensory is not just a science, it's art as well, right? So basically, for the packaging, people are not upgrading, right? And what we wanted, and they were not upgrading because they did not associate the matic powder with the machine. They were okay to use some hand wash powder with the machine. So what needed to be established was the suitability or the fit of the product to the machine, to the washing machine, so that it felt sort of synonymous and kind of went together in the consumer mind. If you were to look at, so the click bit is just one thing that was done. If you see along the way on the upgradation journey, there have been collaborations with machine manufacturers where when you buy a machine, the machine manufacturers will actually tell you and encourage you to sort of use the machine relevant products. So there were other nudges combined with this that gave the impact. But the root of it was really trying to identify, when research was done and there was a brainstorming on how do you go about it. It was based on how do I make an intuitive connect between the detergent and the machine. Yeah, so that was a brainstorming thing that was done within the team, and therefore I would call it an art as well. Was there another question? Or I don't know, Sandeep, you had something.
Supriya, the other question, of course, the other panelists can step in, is in a non-consumer goods category. Any examples or experiences of applying sensory sciences?
Can I take Sandeep that?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, because my favorite brand, Apple. So if you see, Apple is the brand which really leverages sensory to its max, right? So it's very simple. If you see the color, so from the appearance itself, you feel it a very classic, and the simplicity. And when we touch is one of the most important thing. When you adopt the brand, you never leave the brand, right? Because the experience to the touch makes you feel that you are getting the desired consumer experience while working with the Apple, or while working with the MacBook, or whether it's the mobile phones and all. So for me, I think the great example given non-FMCG is the Apple one.
So Apple would have been mine. When we say touch, Apple is the one which a lot of us show in presentations of how it is differentiated on touch and how it has used touch to differentiate it. So Apple does use sensory. Apple has always been using, but when you take it to a category like this, you need to spend time to understand the category, kind of panelists you'll need, kind of people you need, and kind of attributes you design to check. So it's a different science. But yes, Apple does use sensory. I'm not sure of Samsung, but some of the things that Samsung has been doing, in some form or other, they've been running their sensory panels out of Korea where they do their development. So, Sundar, how are we on timing? Because we do have some part to cover.
We are a little behind, Sandeep. So on and forward. Sandesh, if you can move the slide to the methodologies and let the experts speak. Yeah, over to you guys.
Sure. So one of the simpler, I will pick up the simpler methodology, something which when I started my quant research career back in 90s, I had seen, which is check all that apply. I did not know how to use it, but we still put it in quant questionnaires and we put it in the end of appendix slides. But if you're using it for product screening, it comes in pretty handy where you have a lot of attributes and you want to know, say, Nirmala talked of refreshment, which prototype is getting higher associations on simple, give a one page of attributes to consumers, you'll get a basic read to screen the attributes, the prototypes out. Comes to another one, which is very interesting, much easier to do, which is discrimination test. Discrimination test or triangle test. One of my favorites because it's simple, is you give two products where one of the products has a duplicate. And you ask the person to test and tell us which one is similar. So ABC, is A similar to B? Is A similar to C? or is B similar to C, is the question asked them. There are no diagnostics here, but you're doing it. But it has a lot of application because you just change an ingredient. You change the supplier of your pulp, which is going into your juice. You want to make sure that the product is same as the last batch. So you need to do that basic testing to make sure that you're delivering standard products. So discrimination test also comes in where you have less time, you can use it. And one of the least used methodologies here, which is the temporal dominance, because it's restricted to certain categories. But toothpaste, chewing gums, where you know that after 5 minutes, how is the chewing gum gonna fare? How after 10 minutes, would I get still an aftertaste out of the Colgate Fresh or a Close-Up, is something which matters to consumers, so you check it. And the last but not the least, which is the gold standard across, and we very often in sensory talk of sensory panels, which is a QDA. Now, there is spectrum, but spectrum I don't think gets used too often, at least in India. There are clients which use spectrum, but it's normally QDA. QDA and spectrum are differentiating two different methodologies. And what it does, it gives you a sensory profile of each. We're going to go into QDA in more detail, but it gives you a sensory profile of each product being tested vis-a-vis the other products being tested in the panel. And why should you use a QDA, and why does it get used so often? Because sometimes you think the problem is sweetness, but the sweetness is not a problem, and the problem is actually in some other attributes, because attributes are cross-linked. QDA analysis will give you very clear directions to product development and product optimization most of the time. Again, it's an art, not a science. So it's not that 100% of time you do a QDA analysis, you get a clear, 100% clear, but in 95, 97% time, your guidance to PD product development is very clear coming from there. Next slide, please. So,
can I just make a very small comment on the previous one? Very like.
Sure.
So it's not really a comment. It's more of a tip. You know, it's something that has worked for me. Is that there are sensory tools, and they are typically they're quantitative tools, right? And I have always found that when you're trying to answer the why, if you have a combination of qualitative and sensory, so you're doing them simultaneously, it is really, really powerful in terms of generating the right hypothesis to answer why. So and when I say qualitative, they are not, you're asking the for a question and you're getting a response and decoding it. It is more observation driven qualitative work. So it's about seeing what people do instead of what they say in the qualitative context, and marrying that with sensory data. This combination is, I would say, supremely powerful for R&D. Sorry, that's just the tip I had.
Yeah, but for that, they have to understand what is QDA. You'll marry that, because look, all this used to look like Greek and Latin to me some years back, but to marry that, first you have to understand what QDA's power is. It gives you a profile, sensory profile of each of the products you're testing. Now, panelists rate each attribute, and when they're rating each attribute, they are supposed, they are served products in duplicate or triplicate. It's always in blind. So they are trained so that they can identify, is A similar to D? So when they are served blind products, and rate it similarly. We're not expecting them to rate it same. So 79, 80 or a 15 and a 14 is fine, rather than a 15 and a 5. What sensory or a QDA is not, it is not an average of 12 panelist scores on an attribute. All panelists are expected to score similarly, and they are supposed to, and a lot of time we're using 95% SIG test to check who is the person who's an outlier, and not include their scores of their attributes in the final analysis. So this is a calibrated, it's almost like a machine. You know, you can for a viscosity of a product, if you want to know the juice, what is the viscosity level, there is a machine. But what about aftertaste? Aftertaste or the is something which gets measured by almost a machine, but it's a human being which gives you a rating and which helps you place where your product is. And when you need to understand sensory profile, because you need to make changes, you need to do the QDA, because in India and China, it is still easier to relaunch products. But when you're in Western countries, or when you're to relaunch is not an option. So you need to get your product profile right at the first time. And once you get a product profile right, you cannot go back and start serving them product which is different. So consistent product is something which sensory helps you identify always. Anything to add to this, Supriya, Nirmala? I think we are way over time. That's why I was trying to. Okay. Next slide, please, Sandesh. So setting up a sensory panel, one of the things which is not here, and I'm going to skip the next two slides, so I'm going to talk about it right now for this, is scoping. As an organization, this is a tough decision. You're talking of a real estate in Mumbai, Bangalore, Delhi, Gurgaon. You're talking about real estate. You're talking about what am I going to do? What is the scope of the products? I would like Supriya or Nirmala to talk about scoping, and then I go back to. Would you want to add anything on scoping? Why scoping is a big challenge, Supriya?
Now, scoping is very important. And before that, also the objective, right? Sandeep, the question you're asking is very important. You should be clear on what is the objective and what you are trying to come up with, whatever you are doing. So based on that, scoping and what are the products you want to put it, and how many products you want to put it, what kind of a profile they are going to have. You cannot put the cheese with something else, right? So it's the category. So I think it's all about a clear scoping, which will really help us. What are you trying to accomplish?
Sure. Anything to add, Supriya, to that?
So I think more than objective setting, it's more of expectation setting. So the one thing that influences expectation setting or objective setting is the gap between the usage protocol, which is like absolutely controlled, and the actual consumer habits, which tend to be varied and really complex. So at the briefing stage, always ask the question, why are you running the test? Is it to pull apart the technology used in the products and see if the technology works? Because then you would want to be operating with very controlled conditions. And if you want to figure whether the technology works in the context of certain consumer habits, then you would actually use a different sort of design. So asking the question upfront will help us design the study, appropriately, I would say.
Sure. So when you're scoping, just to summarize, you also need to look at what is your next 2-3 years pipeline, because you're investing in something which is big and you're taking a lot of real estate space. One of the first thing that you'll end up doing is identifying physical space, getting somebody to design the booths, their lighting. What kind of lighting do you need? Do you need neutral lighting? Do you need lighting which changes because you might want to do seat in red light? Because booths, once designed, can be altered, but it's better to do it upfront. But once the booths are out, you have to decide who's your panel leader. You can recruit somebody. You also have an option of asking a third-party provider to send your panel leader who would be at least knowing what they are doing. Panel leader will help you recruit, or at least they will get train the panel. So trained assessors, you recruit people who are sensory acute, you train them for 3 weeks to 6 weeks to 9 weeks, depending on what kind of work you're doing. But easily 2 to 3 months is something that we do. You need to also have somebody who will make sure the samples are served at a certain temperature, which is sample preparation lead, because you don't want to spend X amount of dollars or X amount of millions of rupees and figure out that the samples are not served properly. So somebody is interested with making sure the storage of the products, that when you're taking them out of the fridge, if they're chocolates, when you're serving them, is all done at an SOP temperature or the way it is supposed to be done. And you very often the panel leader also doubles up as a data analyst and statistician, at least in India. Because they set up this project on for the sensory product. I'm not trying to sell any of them, so I will not name what you're using. But they set up the project, so then it's easy for them to analyze also. But otherwise, if you're going to have loads of projects coming in, then you need to look for data analysts. You need physical space, you need lighting, you need climate controlled booths. Every sample would have a 3-digit codes for blind evaluation. How are you going to present? Why are you going to present will depend on project to project. And the critical part, and it's literally written at the last of my slide, is distractions. There are times that we have worked where the panelist has not been able to do her evaluation very well because her kid has been unwell. So panelists are almost like artists, almost, because they're supposed to work like a machine and collaborate. That 1.5 minutes, if they are distracted, because there's a lot of sound, there's a truck going out, there's some construction work, their ratings are not going to be fine. And that basically means that multi-million-dollar decisions that you're making of changing a product formulation might be wrong. So distractions are something in a sensory booth or should not be there at all. So a properly designed sensory environment is what you will invest in. And next slide, please. Scoping we already discussed. Recruit and train we have discussed. Now lexicon and anchors. I tried. So lexicon is all the attributes. And what do the attributes stand for? It's not saying aftertaste. What does aftertaste mean? Also, at times you will in India you will also end up translating them into Hindi because they should get. But typically, panelists in India would need to understand English. You cannot have panelists who only understand Tamil or Marathi and all, because a lot of us who do work, and I'm not saying that there can't be exceptions. Sorry, I apologize. But if you have to explain to them, they need to understand what your attributes are. But yes, the attributes will carry translations. And the anchors are, if you're describing aftertaste, what's the extreme of an aftertaste where you give 10 out of 10 or a thing, and the least, you will define an anchor. Next slide, please. So design, I think we touched upon the blinding codes and the replicates of the product, and we also touched upon analysis part. All I would say is that what you get is sensory maps, which you get sensory profiles of each product, sensory maps, and you can use this data with consumer data to do drivers of liking analysis. And I think Sundar wants me to go on. So next slide. I will skip this slide and go on to the last slide. So I know we are way out of time, but if you have a sensory challenge and you have a product challenge, you have a marketing challenge. So which is why I'm saying it's not only about R&D, and it's not only, pick your sensory cues, pick up sensory attributes and what you will differentiate, because if you don't differentiate, you'll die. If you once have a product, don't keep on making changes to a product. Change minimally, check whether because once you have sold a product to somebody, the sensory cues are set in their mind and you cannot keep on changing that. Track 1 to 2 KPIs, that's easier rather than trying to map all KPIs. And last but not the least, tell simple stories, have very clear, simple stories for your product and brand, and tell them help sensory and the product demonstrate them. Thank you so much. I think we're way out of time and Sundar might have some questions. Time for Q&A. Thank you. Sundar, now you're on mute.
keeping to time, I guess we have enough time for okay, maybe hang on. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Check, Sandeep.
Yeah, you're audible.
Wonderful. All right. So I think I have a bandwidth issue. So I'm going to take off video.
Sure.
All right. So just rounding off with a few last questions before I make some announcements from the MRSI. First of all, thank you for sharing your experiences and bringing sensory science to life. To me, I picked up a lot of things in terms of where it can exactly come and help us in terms of our marketing questions or product development questions, that it does require a serious investment in terms of setting up a trained panel. It's not just you design a question, get people into a room, get the answers and go on. There's an art and science to it, but there's also a fair amount of pre-setup work that is required. And the third important point is, going back to what I said earlier in the call, if how bitter is a question we need to answer, I guess, in my opinion, there is no other way we can go and answer that, right? Just a quick question, all of you as panelists can weigh in. Are there any reference points when you do a study, say, take bitterness as an example, because there is a panel and you do a few studies, is there a way to kind of benchmark? Are we referring to a benchmark, or every time is a, new animal and we are rediscovering something? So that was one of the questions from our audience.
Nirmala, would you want to take it?
Yeah, I can take it. So, Sundar, it all depend upon the categories, right? Because something which is bitter in one category can delight in other category. For example, the coffee, right? Coffee bitterness versus, if I say, bitterness is the orange juice kind of a thing. So it all depend upon the categories, and for the particular categories, we may see what are the product available in the market and what is the threshold level, and it also how it is interacting with the other, flavors, sweetness and sourness and all, and also the lingering. So what the consumer is expecting, because most of the time the consumer expectation is closer to the real. Suppose they want fruit juice, right? So they want it to be real to the orange juice they squeeze at their home kind of a thing. So it's all depend upon the category, and we find or we optimize or we select the benchmark based on the categories. Sandeep, anything to add?
Thanks, Nirmala.
And once you for a category identified a benchmark for bitterness, you normally don't change it unless there's a very good reason. So if I'm checking a differences, I will change it only if you say it's chocolates. If I'm doing 90% plus chocolates and want to differentiate, then I might change it, my benchmark. But if I'm just checking milk chocolates, my benchmark will remain the same most of the time.
Thanks, Sandeep and Nirmala. The Q&A, and I think as panelists, you've been kind enough to take questions along the way, but there are still a few that we have not been able to answer. The MRSI Directorate will be in touch with you with a set of questions that you can provide your answers to. Audience, it will be available as part of the recording in our MRSI website. For those of you who want your friends to kind of learn from this webinar, you can direct them to the MRSI website. The recording of this session will also be available. Sandesh, next slide, please. Two upcoming events. I'm sure one that you all know exists. The other one is a new launch this year. It's calling members, underlined members, to come and play. There are cricket tournaments to be organized by the MRSI for our members in December. So registrations start tomorrow. Log into the website and get in your teams. The other announcement is the Golden Key Awards, scheduled for the 6th of March, 2026. It will be in Mumbai. And you can look forward to announcements soon on where you can enter in your, where you can, provide details about your entries. The cricket tournament will be in Gurugram. Hope to see a good participation. Next slide, please. It's just going to be a thank you, stay connected. Thank you, audience. Panelists, you've been wonderful, bringing to life something that is a difficult area for marketers to assess and act on. and create products and create experiences and create product packaging. Thank you so much. Wonderful having all of you with us. Good day. Signing off, Sundar Muthuraman. Good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.